33,000 people lost their jobs in a single devastating corporate extinction event. The doors locked on over 700 sprawling stores across the country, turning vibrant aisles of childhood wonder into cavernous, darkened husks. For decades, Toys R Us was not just a retail store. It was a cultural monolith, a physical manifestation of American consumer joy. Yet when the end came, the public narrative was deceptively simple, blaming the unstoppable rise of digital commerce and the modern convenience of two-day shipping. But that narrative is a convenient fiction, a smokescreen obscuring a far more ruthless reality. The true architect of this collapse was not a tech giant in Seattle or a fundamental shift in the way children play. The empire was hollowed out from the inside, systematically drained of its lifeblood by a complex financial maneuver executed in the quiet, air-conditioned boardrooms of Wall Street. It was a calculated extraction of wealth that left an iconic brand suffocating under an invisible, crushing weight. To understand the murder weapon, one must first understand the victim at the height of its power. In the late 20th century, Toys R Us pioneered a ruthless, highly effective business model known as the category killer. By focusing entirely on one specific type of merchandise and buying in massive, unprecedented volumes, they could offer a selection and price point that local toy shops and general department stores simply could not match. They dictated terms to global manufacturers, controlling the supply chain economics of the entire toy industry with absolute authority. By the early 2000s, however, the retail industry was shifting, and the giant was showing signs of fatigue. Sales growth had slowed, and the company was struggling to adapt its massive physical footprint to a rapidly changing consumer landscape. But to a specific breed of financial predator, a struggling retailer with a massive portfolio of owned real estate and a steady stream of global cash flow is not a failing business. It is an irresistible target. In 2005, a consortium of private equity firms recognized the immense untapped value locked within the company's assets. Private equity operates in the shadows of the public markets, pooling capital from wealthy investors and pension funds to acquire companies, ostensibly to restructure them for maximum profitability before selling them at a premium. They approached the board of Toys R Us with a $6.6 billion buyout offer, promising a new era of private ownership shielded from the relentless quarterly demands of Wall Street shareholders. But the consortium did not use $6.6 billion of their own money to make the purchase. They utilized a financial strategy known as a leveraged buyout. In a leveraged buyout, the acquiring firms use a small amount of their own capital and borrow the rest, using the assets of the company they are buying as collateral for the massive loans. Imagine buying a house, but instead of using your own credit score and income to secure the mortgage, you force the house itself to take on the debt, leaving the structure responsible for paying off its own purchase price. The moment the ink dried on the 2005 acquisition, the financial reality of the toy giant was violently altered. Overnight, a company that had previously maintained a manageable, conservative balance sheet was suddenly saddled with over $5.3 billion in new corporate debt. The consortium had contributed only a fraction of the purchase price in cash, shifting the overwhelming burden of the borrowing directly onto the ledger of Toys R Us. For the employees working the registers and stocking the shelves, the shift in ownership initially felt distant, a high-level abstraction completely detached from their daily reality. But the invisible weight of that massive obligation quickly began to manifest in the physical world. The debt carried exorbitant interest rates, requiring massive, non-negotiable cash payments every single quarter just to keep the creditors at bay. This relentless demand for cash fundamentally rewired the company's operational priorities. Before the acquisition, profits could be reinvested into the business, used to renovate aging stores, upgrade archaic inventory tracking software, or build a robust online shopping platform to compete with emerging digital threats. After the leveraged buyout, nearly every spare dollar generated by the sale of action figures and bicycles was immediately siphoned out of the company to service the debt. While the toy giant bled cash to its Wall Street masters, the broader retail industry was undergoing a technological revolution. Competitors like Target and Walmart were pouring billions of dollars into modernizing their supply chains and integrating their physical stores with seamless digital experiences. Amazon was rewriting the rules of commerce entirely, conditioning consumers to expect infinite selection and rapid delivery at the click of a button. Against this backdrop of rapid modernization, the debt-laden toy retailer was frozen in amber. Between 2007 and 2017, the company paid an estimated $400 million a year just in interest payments. That was $400 million annually that could not be spent on lowering prices, improving the customer experience, or paying competitive wages. The financial engineering had created a zombie corporation, walking dead among agile, heavily armed competitors. The decay became impossible to ignore on the store floor. Ceilings leaked, lighting fixtures went unreplaced, and staffing levels were slashed to the absolute bone to preserve cash. Employees found themselves apologizing to frustrated parents for messy aisles and out-of-stock items, completely unaware that the root cause of their misery was a complex web of high-yield bonds and syndicated loans orchestrated a decade prior. The architecture of a leveraged buyout is designed to insulate the private equity sponsors from the very risks they create. If the acquired company succeeds, the sponsors reap astronomical profits. If the company collapses under the weight of the debt, the sponsors lose only their initial, relatively small equity investment, while the acquired company and its creditors bear the catastrophic losses. It is a system of privatized gains and socialized corporate losses, perfectly legal and entirely ruthless. By the time the critical holiday shopping season of 2017 approached, the illusion of sustainability finally shattered. Suppliers, spooked by the company's rapidly deteriorating cash position and looming debt maturities, began demanding cash on delivery for their merchandise. Without the ability to stock its shelves for the most profitable quarter of the year, the company had no choice. In September 2017, Toys R Us filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The initial bankruptcy filing was framed to the public as a strategic restructuring, a temporary pause to renegotiate the debt and emerge as a leaner, more competitive retailer. But the creditors, holding the highly leveraged paper, realized that the company's real estate and inventory were worth more liquidated than the company was worth as an ongoing, struggling enterprise. The cold calculus of the market prevailed, and the decision was made to pull the plug entirely, transitioning from restructuring to total liquidation. In the final chaotic months, the stark cruelty of the financial hierarchy was laid bare. As the liquidation process began, the bankruptcy court approved millions of dollars in retention bonuses for top executives, arguing that their specialized expertise was necessary to wind down the operation smoothly. These were the very architects and caretakers of the collapse, heavily compensated while the ship sank beneath them. Conversely, the 33,000 everyday workers who had dedicated years, sometimes decades, to the company were left with nothing. Because of the specific legal structuring of the bankruptcy and the priority of the secured creditors, the severance pay that had been promised to employees was completely wiped out. The financial engineers had ensured that the debt holders were first in line to pick the carcass clean, leaving the workforce to face sudden unemployment with zero financial safety net. The death of Toys R Us is not an isolated tragedy of a bygone era. It is a glaring indictment of a specific mechanism of modern capitalism. It reveals how the financialization of the economy has decoupled corporate ownership from the actual business of creating value. The private equity model, when applied with such aggressive leverage, treats legacy companies not as institutions to be nurtured, but as host organisms to be drained of capital until they expire. The legacy of this leveraged buyout extends far beyond empty storefronts in suburban strip malls. It serves as a grim template, a warning of what happens when the mechanisms of debt are weaponized against the very foundations of the retail industry. The same strategies have since been deployed against countless other brands, from regional grocery chains to national clothing retailers, often ending in the same predictable, devastating cycle of extraction and collapse. The power dynamic has permanently shifted from the creators of goods and services to the manipulators of capital. The unseen hand of that system still guides markets today, operating in the quiet spaces between balance sheets and bankruptcy filings. It is a shadow ledger where the true cost of financial engineering is never calculated in dollars and cents, but in the shattered livelihoods of ordinary people. Ultimately, the story of how debt crushed a toy giant is a testament to the profound disconnect between Wall Street and Main Street. The executives and private equity managers who orchestrated the 2005 buyout moved on to other lucrative ventures, their personal wealth largely insulated from the fallout. But for the thousands of workers who lost their jobs and the communities left with vacant commercial craters, the consequences of that invisible corporate debt remain a harsh, enduring reality.